This is the pain of being in love with someone who doesn't love you. Love isn't exactly going to be the easiest thing in the world. It can be really tricky. There are just so many variables and degrees surrounding love, and it often comes attached with a wave of various emotions. Sometimes, love can be the single most beautiful thing in the world. And yet, at other times, it can be also the most devastating thing to ever happen to a human being. It's funny how a single entity like love can mean so many different things to so many different people. It spans both extremes of a person's emotional plane. It's so complex and colorful, and that's what makes love so hauntingly beautiful. Pure love might be the best closest thing to resemble perfection in this life. Love is one thing that can fully encompass beauty and despair so eloquently. It's the best experience that two people could ever share with one another. Whenever thoughts of love come flowing into our minds, we tend to think of happiness and joy. We always like to think of them in terms of its beauty and wonder. However, that is far from being the only kind of love that exists. There is a dark side to love, the side that not a lot of people are comfortable with talking about. It's the kind of love that a person feels with someone they could never have, not even a million lifetimes. It's the kind of love that seems hopeless and bleak. It's the kind of love that doesn't necessarily signal the beginning of a beautiful and bountiful relationship. But rather, it's the kind of love that is only going to be composed of a lot of unfulfilled daydreams. It's the kind of love that only exists in fantasies and made-up thoughts. It's unrequited love. It's a love that only goes one way and doesn't return. It's the kind of love that you give but doesn't get back. Love isn't always going to result in two people coming together and forming a kind of perfect union. In fact, a lot of love involves one person suffering from another person carrying on so nonchalantly. This is a side of love that we rarely ever talk about because of how depressing and unnerving it seems. The sad truth is that there are just some people who are never going to end up in a lasting relationship with one another. Love alone is not going to be enough to sustain a relationship. Yes, it can be very easy to fall into the trap of believing all of those fairy tales. It can be so very easy to just convince yourself that love will be enough to overcome any trials that you might face in life. But that's far from the truth. You can't be so naive. Don't allow yourself to take such a deluded stance on love and romance. Love is not a rational force that will make sense of everything. There is no science behind it. There is no way that you will be able to guarantee the results. As much as you would want to believe for love to be perfect all the time, that just isn't going to be the case. Love isn't always going to be fair to you. Just because you show the willingness to give all the love you have doesn't mean that you are guaranteed returns of that love. That's just not how love works. The sooner you get that through your mind, the more prepared you will be to handle an unrequited love. We are all flawed human beings. We aren't always going to be able to make the right decisions in this life. We aren't always going to be able to make the right choices. And love isn't always going to give us the magical powers to never be wrong. Even though you might believe yourself to be the ultimate love of another person's life, they're not always going to see things the same way. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. But just because something is right doesn't mean that other people are going to realize it either. And so, you need to expose yourself to that kind of love more. You need to come to the realization that love isn't always going to be so ideal. You have to understand that love isn't always going to work out the way you want it to. Love isn't always going to be there for you. And when love doesn't go your way, it can hurt. It can hurt a lot, But there's one more thing that you have to know about love. Even though it might hurt you a lot, it's always worth taking a chance on. Because once you do find the love that is right for you, then you're going to realize just how beautiful this life could truly be.